Hi, and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 146, and it's the good one. It's the one that you're all waiting for, the early data from the new set. And the new set is, of course, Aetherdrift. And we're going to be looking at the cards that are important, strategies that are working, strategies that are not working, and try to see in the data why that happens in my usual setup. Before we dive into that, thanks to mtgazone.com for being a sponsor. Thanks to all my patrons. I have one new patron. I mean, it's not very new, but we just didn't have any episodes early in the year. And also, the last episode was the chaos of draft skeletons, and I didn't have time to acknowledge them. But thank you very much, Philip, for your patronship. Philip just liked my YouTube video and decided, you know what, I'm going to give $2 to this guy a month, and I'm happy with that. And I love that attitude, and more people like Philip, please. What do we also have to say? Oh, bulk box. If you are looking for something to store your things, bulk box is the place. And if you are interested, you can use the code SHARECO10 if you're in UK to get yourself a bulk box. I use them. I used them before they reached out to me. And I'm very happy with how they use them. Okay, this out of the way, we can move to the preamble. And the preamble today, there is a lot of sort of fetishization of that the set has to be balanced and the colors have to be balanced, and only good sets can only be when all the colors are made equal. And so far, I actually enjoyed quite a lot the new set, and you can call it many things, but it's not balanced. One color is way stronger than the others. One color is way weaker than the others, and there are three in the middle somewhere. That doesn't disturb my my enjoyment of the set. I think it will actually make the late format quite much more interesting, because we're going to run into the situation when the good color, I'm not going to give spoilers, don't judge it by the picture that is on the slide. The good color is going to be overdrafted at some stage, and the key cards of the good color are going to be, well, high picks. And the color that is weaker, which is not on the slide, so you cannot guess it, but you can maybe figure it out if you played a couple of drafts here and there, is going to be open, and that will leave opportunities for using nice strategies. And I think I'm going to dive a bit into that today. I'm not going to give you like the full picture, because we still don't have the full picture. We just have 4 days of data, and that's it what we have. But it's going to be more open, and I think that there are abusable strategies linked to that, and we're going to touch upon that when we talk about each color pair, because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to first look at some generic data, which colors are winning how much, which colors are drafted by 17 lens users the most, which color pairs are doing the best, how many colors people play in their decks and stuff like that. Then we're going to go through each color and look at the most important cards, so bombs, best uncommons, best commons. And after that, we have a long session of each color combination, best common, best uncommon, cards I consider hidden gems, and cards I consider traps. And that will open a discussion to what's important in the bigger plans, because I think that it's important to look at those data not only through, oh yeah, this card is busted and that's the end of the story. The fact that some cards are busted and some are not is very much dependent on the nature of the set. And I think that this is a particular case. This is a set unlike any other that we had in the recent years. And because of that, some cards that are normally great are just not performing here. And I think there's a good reason for that. And yeah, again, we're going to dive into that when we reach that bridge. So first things first, color popularity rankings. And this graph is one of the most it has the most variance from normal sets. So normally what we see is that the top color is played like 22% of the time, and the one that is underplayed is something like maybe 18, 17. Here we see green is being played 23.5% of the time, and that's across 2 color decks and 3 color decks. White is played only 15%, and that's a big drop off. White is basically avoided in this set by 17 lens users at least. And then we have blue at 21.7, black at 20.6, and red at 18.8. Now, obviously, in a perfectly balanced format, this would be all 20% across board. It's not, Green definitely overdrafted, and I think that's going to change only for the worse for green in the next days. People are going to be basically soft forcing green. White is definitely underdrafted at 15.4. And it might even go down from that. And especially that I think that the best white color combination is white green, duh. And I think that that's going to be one of the strategies. But I think that the best non-green containing white archetype is severely underdrafted right now in white black, and I think that there is something to be found in that solution space. In terms of the win rates of colors, we basically see that there are good reasons why people overdraft green and underdraft white. Green has 57.3% win rate, with average win rate being 55.6. This is a lot because when you think about it, green is probably like 45, 46% of all the decks. The fact that 45 or 46% of all the decks have almost 2 percentage points higher win rate than the other ones, it means that the other 53% has a way below average win rate. So it's a quite a strong data point there. White is at the bottom at 53.9, but red is not much better than white. Red is only 54.4% in terms of win rate across all color pairs. So white is underdrafted, but red is probably overdrafted compared to what power it does. So we probably will see some kind of a correction there as well. And the interesting part also is to see that blue and black are flipped. Blue is more drafted at 21.7 than black at 20.6, but it's black that has a higher win rate at 56.1 and blue only 55.6. Blue is basically on par with the average for the set. This is something that I think also will be changing in the next days. I think that you should be watching carefully if there are black cards, because these two colors are both powerful, but I think black is much more powerful at common level. So if you can pick some strong cards early in black at higher rarities that there are not so many of, you probably will be quite rewarded later in the draft by getting those good black commons. While blue is very powerful at uncommon level. The uncommon level of blue is just amazing, and commons are lacking, to be fair. So for blue, you need to have blue really open in the table, because only higher rarity cards, uncommon and higher, are really powerful in that color combination. Which is fine if you pair it with green, because green is busted at every rarity level, so that's fine. You can fill up your deck with the scary foots, and be fine with that, and then maybe pick whatever blue uncommons you can find. In terms of DFT, is it a two-color format? I would say predominantly yes. Around 2/3 of the decks are strictly two-color, and that's usually a signal of a strong two-color set. But some splashing is available. 25% of the decks are splash, two colors and splash. Around 7.5% are three color, and another 1.5% is three color and splash, and another 1.1% is monocolor and splash. So there are options to be playing more colors. Monocolor, as always, doesn't come together a lot. It will very rarely happen, and don't count on it. In some sets, we will see like 3-4% monocolor decks, and these are the ones that allow you to play monocolor. This one definitely is not one of those. And very few decks are 4 colors or more. So that's one thing. But I think that there is a solution space for like multicolor decks. It's just that they need to be developed better, and people need to figure out how to build them. But they look like they are winning. So that's something that doesn't happen very often. Normally, when people start playing 3-4 colors, the win rate drops off. But here we don't see that. We see actually quite a weird trend in which, well, of course, the monocolors decks are usually having high win rate because they're just so consistent, and you don't lose games to having color screw. And the color must have been really, really open if you went monocolor, and especially if it's a strong color like green, and you play a mono green deck in this format, you're going to be winning quite a lot, I guess. Two color decks are having 56.5% average win rate. Then it drops off to 55.1 for two colors and a splash, and then 52% for three color decks. But when you go to 3 colors and a splash, it's already 54.8, so almost as good as 2 color and a splash, which is a bit weird. And this is based on like a sizable sample size. It's not amazing. It's like 1,000, 2,000. But this is enough to, to at least start looking at it with interest. And then there are decks that have 4 and 5 colors. The sample size was too small for me to really include them. But it's interesting to know that they do have even higher win rate than the 3 colors and a splash. So there might be a dedicated 5-color deck of some sorts. And I think that it would be worth for you to look through some trophy decks and try to find those full color piles and see which cards are important for those, so that maybe you can add it to your arsenal. Especially, we're talking about arena drafting, but some of you, I don't know, I don't know how many, 300 of you maybe, which would be a sizable portion of my audience if you all listen to it. But some of you will be preparing for the Pro Tour, and having that kind of weapon in your arsenal is actually quite useful, because you will be having a very different pick order. And if you have a different pick order, you can find a very unique position in your pod drafting. And then if the decks are still solid, you might find a niche for yourself. When it comes to the color popularity ranking, the most drafted color combination is Golgari, and I've seen it. I drafted a lot of times, and I drafted green a lot of times, and only last draft I found like the Golgari lane open, and it did result in a trophy. Deck is clearly good. I found it really, really hard to find like an open Golgari lane, and maybe that's why 15.6% of the drafters in 17 lands do draft Golgari when they draft 2 colors. And this is 50% more than you would expect, because you would expect each of the 10 color combinations to be drafted around 10% of the time. Then we have 4 decks that are just above those 10%. Simic at 12.6, Dimir at around 12, Gruul and Izzet at 10.5. And then we go to the latter half with Rakdos and Selesnya and Azorius around 8.5% of all drafts. Boros at 7.6 and Orzhov at 5.6. Orzhov is severely underdrafted compared to the other color pairs, and I don't really know why. I think that it's because we still didn't figure out how to really draft Orzhov deck, and hopefully after this episode you will have a slightly better idea on how it happens. Orzhov, I think, is still overdrafted because, allegedly reputable content creators like Paul Cheon in a couple of weeks ago episode of LR told that if you are in doubt in format and you go in blind, just draft Boros. Boros is always good. And I actually showed a graph day after that episode of LR on Blue Sky that he was absolutely right. If you look at the last year and a half of sets or 2 years of sets, Boros was by far the most winning color combination. But not in this set. In this set, Boros sucks. And it's nice to say that. Last time it happened was Kamigawa Neon Dynasty when they tried something new. But I think that this is really the first time when Boros aggro is not really good in living memory of limited sets. So this is the win rate of color pairs, and I kept the same order as the popularity. And you see the 2 most popular decks, Golgari and Simic, are both the 2 most winning decks. And what a world are we living in when Simic is the top win rate archetype and Boros is the lowest win rate archetype. How the tables have turned compared to the last couple of years when Simic was notoriously the red lantern of all the color pairs. 59.1% for Simic. This is a very good result. Like, just to give you a comparison, in Foundations, the top winning archetype at this stage of the format was Azorius with, I think, 56.7. So like almost 2.5 percentage points lower than Simic is right now. And then Golgari has 58.7. So there's like statistically they're basically the same, but they're above the rest. So both Golgari and Simic are just head and shoulders above all the other archetypes. 2 most drafted, but also 2 most winning. And then we see like sort of a trend that you would expect. Dimir is at 56, Gruul is at 56.6. So maybe Dimir is slightly overdrafted compared to what he's doing as an archetype, but people want to play that affinity kind of grindy control. Izzet 54.4, and that's definitely overdrafted. Izzet is drafted 10.5% of the time. It probably should be drafted something like 8-7. But yeah, I can see the appeal. I probably drafted like 4 Izzet decks already, and yeah, one of them trophied. The other ones did not. Then we have Rakdos at 55.3, which is sort of like just below that average. And then we have Selesnya, which is drafted below average, but has an above average win rate at 56.4. And I think that Selesnya is one to watch, because if white is open and you can get the signposts, which are quite important, and at the same time, you can get some really good white cards, that a couple of them are there, I think you're in for some kind of a winning recipe. Okay, the question from the chat is it possible that early in the format, the better players are more likely to play 4-5 colors, increasing the win rate? Also, conversely, an inexperienced drafter is more likely to draft and pilot a mediocre 3-color deck. Yeah, these are all possible explanations for that. That it will be the grinders that already are bored after 4 days that try to draft 4 or 5 colors, and then a mediocre player will be often pushed off a 2-color deck and have to play a full 3-color deck because of that. This is all that things that we have to take into account. Unfortunately, I cannot really tell that early what is the player composition in each category of the decks, and maybe like later in the format I usually look at those things and then try to speculate on that. Okay, but back to the main topic. Azorius and Boros are the 2 least winning archetypes. Azorius 54 and Boros at 52, compared to Simic at 59. That's a 7 percentage point gap between those 2. And then Orzhov, which is the least drafted, has a solid 55%. And I think that this 55% is already lowered by the fact that this deck is built, even though we have such a small sample size, you can sort of see that it's built badly in some cases. And I think that a good build of Orzhov might be competitive. We're probably not talking like trying to get to the spot of the best archetypes, but I'm pretty sure that it can be, catch up with this middle of the pack, Gruul, Selesnya, and Dimir. I think that Orzhov has some potential if you get the right cards in the right combinations, and if you have the right plan for playing that deck. So that covers the first part, the sort of generic overview of the format. Now we can move to each color evaluation. And for every color, I'm going to be looking at best bombs. And here bombs are defined as cards that have game in hand win rate of above 61%. Then we talk about top commons and top uncommons. So as many bombs as there are, 3 top commons, 3 top uncommons in terms of the game in hand win rate. Now keep in mind, the fact that the card has a good game in hand win rate doesn't mean that it's good in every color combination. And be careful about it. That's why we go to each color combination afterwards and try to see which are color combination specific cards, which cards are specifically bad in some color combinations, and things like that. Okay. White bombs, only 1 card fulfilled that criterion. And that's Perilous Snare. That's the 2 and a white artifact with starter engines. And it's basically an artifact Oblivion Ring. But if you have max speed, you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or vehicle you control. Activate only a sorcery. It is just a very solid, great card. Even though it's an artifact which is quite easy to blow up in this format, it still gets like way over 61% game in hand win rate, even though it's not in the strongest color. So yeah, that definitely is the reason to be in white. And you should watch that card. And if you see it, I would just snap it and try to squeeze it into my deck. In terms of the top commons, and I order them from, this is number 1, this is number 3. Ride's End, happy times because I picked it in the MTG data science poll for which common will be the best in each color. Ride's End is the top common in white. That's the 4 and a white instant. Exile target creature or vehicle, but it does cost 3 less to cast if it targets a tapped permanent. And I think that this is the biggest sort of card design win of last year for the design team. I think that this new type of white removal is just brilliant. It works offensively, it works defensively. It works better defensively than offensively, but still gives you some capacity to play that in aggro decks and can deal with annoying things. This one exiles, which is even better. So because it's a better version of things that we had that were good in the previous sets, it's just doing even better than the previous incarnations of it, like the slumber something, sleepy something, I don't know. Luminous Bonds, I think, was one of them. I throw away the names of the cards just as the set is leaving Arena, because if I tried to memorize all of them, my brain would just explode. Then the second one is maybe a bit surprising to some of you. It's the Broadcast Rambler. 4 and a white, so another 5-drop. Oh, Ceased from Slumber, Luminous Rebuke. There you go. Broadcast Rambler is a 5-mana vehicle. It's a 5/4, and when it enters, you make a 1/1 Topter artifact creature token with flying, and it has Crew 1. Like, first of all, Crew 1 is pretty good, especially on such a big body. And then the fact that it makes a Topter that can crew it means that even if you cast it on an empty board, you have something to crew it, which is fine. And if they want to kill the Topter with actual decent removal, then you're probably half winner. Okay, you are left with a useless vehicle, but any creature that you draw is going to be able to crew it. And now probably I should put an asterisk and then say that there is at least 4 or 5 0 power creatures in this set. But okay, who cares? 5/4 is big enough. The third common is Voyager Quick Welder. That's a 2 and a white, 2/4 artifact creature, robot artificer, and artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, which makes it a great curve out. So you play like turn 3 Voyager Quick Welder, turn 4 you can cast the Broadcast Rambler, and good times ensue. So this is one of like the few good white commons. They drop off very quickly, and that's the problem that white has. It just does not align with what is good in this format, and white cards just, they are like those people who, you know, were invited to a party and thought it was a costume party or fancy dress party, and in fact it was a white tie, and now they are there with balloons and clown outfits and dressed as a cow, and everyone is in a white tie and drinking champagne and looking at them like, what are they doing? After those three, after the Quick Welder, Rambler, and Ride's End, there is a massive drop-off, and all the other cards have like very mediocre win rates. And already these ones are not amazing compared to other covers. So white is not particularly deep at common. But it's also not particularly deep at uncommon. We have Glory Heath Lynx, the 1 and a white 2/3 lifelinker that has saddle 2, and when it attacks while saddled, you can search your library for a basic plain card and put it in your hand. Now this card is busted, and it's a really, really, really strong uncommon, and it's a reason to go into white, very much like the Perilous Snare. But it's still like, you know, one of the few cards that that you can put in your white decks and be happy about it. Now I'm now trying in vain to try to filter out other cards in white at uncommon in 17 lands and try to pretend I'm not doing it, but I'm failing. Okay, remove those things just to give you the impression of the numbers, because I didn't put the numbers on the graphics. But when you look at that, Lynx has around 60% game in hand win rate, which is close to a bomb. And the two other ones that you can see on this slide, Gallant Strike and Sundial, are 57 and 56 respectively. So there is a huge drop off from the Lynx to the rest. And, you know, Gallant Strike, Sundial are good. So Gallant Strike is a card that probably aligns very well with what the format wants to be doing, so playing chonkers. And Sundial is just, you know, 2 mana 3/3. It cannot be that bad, especially when it has some artifact synergies. But this is already a 56% game in hand win rate card, which is not amazing. And then we go further. There's Tension Chariot, which is sort of equal with Sundial at 56. And then we go to Nesting Bot, Roadside Assistant. These are all like 55, 54% win rate cards. And yeah, I mean, already Sundial has a lower win rate than Ride's End or the Broadcast Rambler. So that's the kind of numbers we're talking about here. And yeah, not really amazing. Now, blue is a different story. In case of the bombs, we only have the Mu Yangling, the Wind Rider. That's 2 blue for a legendary creature with human wizard pilot. So many jobs in one person. But it's a 2/4. And when it enters, you make a 3/2 vehicle with crew 1. And all vehicles you control have flying. And whenever a flying creature you control deals damage to a player, draw a card. This is like a bomb. It's insane. It's got like 66% game and end win rate. You should just like never pass it, basically. I mean, yeah, okay. Pack 3, maybe you can just ignore it because the blue and the cost requires you to be blue properly. But it's one of the strongest cards in the whole set, so you should not ignore it at all. And there is like a bunch of other cards that just don't make it in terms of rares. Possession Engine, Mindspring Merfolk, these are all at 60.8, which is still like really, really good. I just didn't make my cutoff, and I made this cutoff already for 4 sets, and I decided I'm not going to make exceptions for the other cards. So Mu Yangling stays as the only bomb, but you have to keep in mind that, yeah, Possession Engine is great. Mindspring Merfolk, maybe that's a surprise. That's the 1/1/1 drop that has exhaust for X blue, and you draw X cards, and you put a +1/+1 counter on each Merfolk creature you control, which means basically itself. But drawing multiple cards is not very easy in this set. So yeah, definitely worth picking that card higher and putting it in your decks. And you have Thopter Fabricator. That's the 3 mana vehicle that has crew 2. It's a 4/4 flying, and whenever you draw a second card each turn, you create a Thopter with flying. So yeah, a 1/1. So these are all great. It just didn't make the cutoff for the bombs. At common, blue is not impressive. The best common is Flood the Engine. That's the 3 mana Charmed Sleep variant. It's the best Charmed Sleep variant in recent years. Taps a creature and it loses all abilities, so you don't get the problem that Charmed Sleep usually had. Okay, I can stop it from attacking, but it still generates value or something because it has trigger effect or whatever. Here we're talking about a card that has like 57.5% win rate. This is not impressive. This is like worse than white commons. And white commons were already not amazing, but it has a lower win rate than both the Ride Down and the Broadcaster something vehicle. And same like Keen Buccaneer and Skystreak Engineer, both are having very, very similar numbers to Flood the Engine, 57.2, 57. There's Bounce Off that is just below that, 56.9. But these are not like impressive numbers. These are not cards that are super high win rate things and not super impactful at common. So keep in mind. I was like Keen Buccaneer. I figured out very quickly that this card is actively good. The 3/4 body, because it's a 3 mana 2/3 with vigilance, and you can exhaust it, and then you draw a card, discard a card, and put a +1/+1 counter on it, making it a 3/4 vigilance. 3/4 vigilance with the quantity of 3/3 elephant tokens you'll be facing is a really solid body because it blocks all of those, and there's a bunch of free ones that can not attack into it in the set. So there's plenty of things that it blocks very well. And the fact that it gives you some card selection on top of everything is not too shabby, and exhaust synergies and stuff like that. Sometimes you can just use it every turn when you have the Elvish Refueler, which is also great. So a bunch of good things on the King Buccaneer. But Skystreak Engineer is the one that really surprised me. So like 2 mana 1/3 flyer, and you can exhaust it for 5 mana, and you put 2+1/+1 counters on this creature. Like normally this 5 mana 3/4 flyer, because that's what it will be in the end if you exhaust it, is not anything impressive. But I think here it aligns nicely because the 1/3 blocks a lot of creatures, and for a long time. Also, the 1/3, sometimes you will want to have this start the engine synergies of some sort. Oh yeah, sorry, 3/5. Yeah, 3/5, not a 3/4. Which is a bit bigger, but you pay 7 mana in total for that, which is more than normal 5 mana that you pay for the 3/4. But it turns out it's good enough. The fact that you can drop it early and it holds the fort, or even trades with a 3/1, you're quite happy in doing that. And then the fact that you can later upgrade it into a threat makes it pretty flexible. So that card is something that did surprise me a bit in the data, and I will look at that card with more caution as I look through the packs next time I'm going to be drafting. But yeah, blue commons are generally not impressive at all. And this is in stark opposition to blue uncommons, which are exquisite. I mean, amazingly good. If you find an open blue lane and you get those uncommons late, excellent. Like, let's start with the top uncommon in blue and top monocolored uncommon in the set. Ranger's Refueler, that's a 1 in a blue vehicle. It's a 3/3 with crew 2. It has, whenever you activate an exhaust ability, you draw a card, and it has exhaust 4, and this becomes a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it permanently becomes a 4/4, you don't need to crew it anymore. But with so many good cards having exhaust and so few ways of getting card advantage in the set, this drawing like 2 cards over the game is more than enough. So maybe first time you activate a Scary Foot, you make your elephant, you make the Scary Foot bigger, and then you draw a card. And then at some stage, you also exhaust this one to draw a card. Probably you don't want to do it too early because, of course, exhausting it exposes it to more removal than if it was only a vehicle. And also it makes it more tempting to kill it because, a 3/3 virtual creature is not exactly the same as an active 4/4. So yeah, Refueler has the win rate that actually would make it a bomb. It has a 61% game in hand win rate. So only one white rare has a better win rate than Refueler. Only one blue rare or mythic has a better win rate than the Refueler. Only one black rare or mythic has a higher win rate than the Refueler. This is just to give you how powerful that card is in this format so far. So yeah, definitely don't ignore it when you see it, and especially when you're in blue. But when you are looking for a second color and you see Refueler somewhere, pick 4 in pack 1, snap it, because you know that even if someone next to you is drafting blue, they don't know where it's at. Likely. And then we have Spikeshell Harrier and Stock Up. Both of them are just below that bomb level. So Spikeshell Harrier, that's it has 60.7, and Stock Up has 60.6% game in hand win rate. So just short of this bomb status. Harrier is a 4 in a blue artifact creature. It's a 4/4. When it enters, you return a creature or a vehicle to an opponent controls to its owner hand. And if that opponent's speed is greater than 1 and is the highest of all the players, then you reduce it by 1. And this count reduces the speed below 1. So yeah. And this is such a painful thing to do to someone who is actually relying on having that max speed. Because usually you spend so much effort getting to max speed, and then they play this, they bounce something that was a threat back to your hand, and they reduce your speed to 3. And that tempo swing, I had the game like that. I was working hard on getting this top speed because I had like some payoffs, and I was so happy that I finally achieved it. Then they played the Spikeshell Harrier, bounced my bigger threat, put 4/4 in front of other threats that I had so that I couldn't attack into my opponent. And I never got back to speed 4 in that game again. And I was pretty much, I spent a lot of resources to get that speed 4. And this taught me, don't build decks that are reliant on getting to speed 4, because you will use way too many resources to get there, and you will not have any resources in the stages of the game where it actually matters. Yeah, Talvi also in the chat says they had the same situation, blue shells, when they had max speed and a payoff, and it was devastating for the rest of the game. Because if you spend resources to get to max speed, you are not going to enjoy the latter half of the game when the Spike Shell Harrier just blocks you. That's why the card is so good. And Stock Up is maybe the card that people are sleeping the most on. It's a 3-mana Divination Plus, I guess. It's sorcery speed, but you look at top 5 cards and you pick 2 of them to put in your hand. Card is amazing, and yeah, please pick it more highly because I'm seeing it way too late in the drafts. Yeah, you can see them pick 6, pick 7 regularly, and the card is like one of the most busted cards in the whole set. So yeah, don't ignore it. And that doesn't end the good blue uncommons. You have still like Transit Mage at 59.6, Roadside Blowout at 58, Sky Raid, the 1/2 that grows with cycling and discarding the card, 58. Ether Siphon, the 1 blue artifact that has 2 tap, draw a card, start your engines, and then you have max speed whenever you draw a card. Each opponent mills 2. That's got around 58. So you know you have like good 7 really solid uncommons in blue, and that's way more than, for example, Whitehead. Black Bombs. Oh, actually, there's no Black Bombs, and no card has gotten into the area where I was happy calling something a bomb. The highest win rate black card is Curse Cloth Wrappings, the 2 black artifact. Zombies get +1/+1, and then for tapping it, you can exile a card in your graveyard that gains Embalm until end of turn. You can cast it, and then you basically return that creature. And that one has 60.2. Gonti is 59.7, which is close, but it's not fulfilling that my artificial criterion. And then there's Speed Demon with at 59.6 or something. So yeah, there are a couple of like good around 60% cards, but nothing across that 61% level. So no Black Bombs. Top commons, and the top black common is the Wreckage Wicker Folk, the 2-mana 1/3 flyer. When it enters, surveil 2, and it's an artifact creature. That card is just great. This one goes still way too late. Update your pick orders if you're not picking it high enough. Card is amazing. Second is Grim Bubble. I have to say I was low on Grim Bubble when it was released. I'm still not super high on it, but it does have the numbers. It has a decent win rate. You know, when you think about it, Wreckage Wicker Folk has 59.1% win rate, and Gonti has 59.7%, just to give you an impression. Yeah, Surveil 2 on turn 2 is so good because it fixes your draw, and you can get out of a deep, like, you can keep hands you would normally never be allowed to keep when you have the Wicker Folk in hand. So yeah, Bubble, and so Wicker Folk has 59% win rate, Grim Bubble around 59, Packdoll Terror around 59. Just outside of that list, we also have the Engine Rat at almost 59 as well. So there's like, these are the 4 really good black commons. And notice that 3 of them are artifacts. I don't think it's an accident. What else do we have there in the Spin Out is definitely good at 58. And then there's a sharp drop-off with Maximum Overdrive, and then even sharper drop-off. And then there's like Mutant Surveyor, but that's already at 56. But yeah, Spin Out, Rat, Terror, Bubble, and Wicker Folk are where it's at common in black. The problem starts with the uncommons. Compared to blue, black is looking way poorer. Back on Track is a surprise winner, I guess. That's the 5-mana Reanimate that also makes a pilot, 1/1 pilot token when you reanimate something. And you can, of course, reanimate a creature or a vehicle. And this card has 60% win rate. That's really, really strong. So I've seen that card also pretty late. And it will be particularly good, of course, in black-green. And in some color combinations is actively pretty bad. But yeah, golden commons we're going to be talking about in a second. But this ain't one of them. But after we move from the Back on Track at 60, second one, Momentum Breaker, only has 58. So that's weaker than all the commons that we mentioned. Yeah, like they are all around 59. So yeah, quick drop off at uncommon, And then you have the Carrion Cruiser, that's all 57 already. And then we go down and there's like Hellish Sideswipe and Wretched Doll. They are all like 56.5. Gastel Raider 56 and Shepherd Archfiend 55.4. So black basically doesn't exist at uncommon level, and that's a problem of the color. Apart from Back on Track, the Momentum Breaker, another card that I was not really looking forward to playing, but actually turned out pretty decent. And Carrion Cruiser, the black uncommons are not very deep. And as the chat mentioned, they are deeper when you look at the signpost, but yeah. Well, the white one only does artifact, no? Someone says in the chat that Wild How Black Reanimate wins so much more than the 4-mana white one. White one only does artifacts, no? Yeah, so that's a big difference. If it did anything, I'm pretty sure that it would be make Abzan kind of reanimator air deck, but as it is, yeah. Red bombs, we have 2. A Draconautics Engineer, a 2-drop. It's a 2-drop 2/2. And that's it. No, just kidding. I mean, that probably wouldn't have made the 61% win rate. It has Exhaust, 2 versions of Exhaust. One for a red mana. All creatures you control, other creatures you control, not all, other creatures you control. So it does not. Gain haste, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So we cannot play it on turn 3 as a 3/3 haste creature. That would have been maybe too busted. And then the second exhaust is 3 and a red, create a 4/4 red dinosaur dragon creature token with flying. The card is just good. You can play it early, so like turn 2. You can play it late and make sure that you get the dragon. You can play it super late, and then you can play this and as a 3/3 and a hasty 4/4 dragon. It's just like does everything. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And then the second one, you have the Howl Squad Heavy. That's a 2 and red Goblin Mercenary. It's a 2/3. Start your engines. Goblins you control, other goblins you control have haste, and you make a 1/1 gobbo at the beginning of your combat, and then it attacks this combat if able. Neat thing is that if you have vehicles, but not when you have mounts, you can use that goblin to crew something, and then it doesn't have to attack because it cannot. So you can build an army of goblins by crewing one vehicle all the time, stuff like that. And at max speed, it can tap for red for each goblin you control, which it's sort of like a throwaway text, but not really. Sometimes it will be useful in some decks to have access to copious amounts of mana once you get to speed, and maybe exhaust that Hazard of the Dunes into a 7/7 when otherwise you wouldn't be able to. 2 bombs is already quite a lot, but there are cards which are not far. Chandra has 60.4, so like Howl Squad Heavy has 64% game and head win rate, which is quite ridiculous. Dragonautics Engineer 62.2, and then Chandra 60.4, and Hazaret is 59.5, and Burnout Bastronaut, the 1-drop 1/1 with Menace and Start Your Engine, that has 59.5, and Boomobile has 59.5. So there's like a broad selection of those rares in red that have around 60% win rate, or maybe a bit higher. In terms of commons, and this probably no one could have, well, very few people could have predicted it, that Thunderhead Gunner, 5 mana, 4/5, reach, is the top red common. Yes, it has another ability: discard a card, draw a card, activate only as a sorcery and only once each turn. And I think that this is the reason why it does so. In those games that go longer, the person who draws more gas is going to win. And Thunderhead Gunner is a creature that will allow you to draw more gas, because whatever you draw, you can, if you like it, you cast it. If you don't like it, you just rummage it and hopefully buy more gas. Over time, you're just going to be, 5 of your 6 turns, you're going to draw gas, and your opponent will draw gas maybe 2-3 turns out of 6. So you're going to probably outgas them across this kind of game. And 4/5 body with reach is big enough. It will stop all the flying attacks, most of the flying attacks, and it can stop quite a substantial chunk of creatures also on the ground. And only second place is Lightning Strike, and it's not that close. actually, when you think about it. Gunner has 57.7 game in hand win rate. Lightning Strike 55.3. That's 2.4 percentage points, and that's a lot. And then we have Crash and Burn at 55.1, just below Lightning Strike. So Lightning Strike is just badly positioned in this format. It does not kill the things that matter, while Crash and Burn actually does fulfill a vital role in the deck by killing Ketradons, for example. And we are not living in a world where you play an aggro and you need Lightning Strike to finish off the game. No, aggro gets cut off way before that. So yeah. And then we have the uncommons. And here also, like, there is not like an amazing collection of cards that you can pick from. You have the Grease Wrench Goblin as the top uncommon, but it's only at 58.3. Compare it to the 61%, like bunch of figs above 60% in blue. Here we have 58.3 as the best uncommon, and then the Mako is at 57 and Road Rage at 56.6. So that's below the Gunner. And then we drop off even further from that because the fourth place Outpace Oblivion is like 55.8, and Dracosaur Auxiliary, the 6 mana mount with haste, 55.3, and then we drop to like 53 with Sky Crash, the End Rider Spike Spitter, and things like that. So really poor showing by the red uncommons and also by commons. That's I'm getting skeptical that you probably want to have the deck with like 4 Gunners and then nothing else, and then maybe some reds if you open them. Yeah, Grease Wrench I drafted a lot, and the card is amazing. And also like the fact that you discard 2 cards when you can have those Makos and the blue creature is just great. But you need to have other cards that are important, like the Gunner, for example, or something big in the other colors. And in green, well, one thing that green is not short in are the bombs. But I was actually quite surprised that actually the top win rate green card is the Lumbering World Wagon. That's the 3 mana vehicle. Its power is equal to the number of lands you control. It has crew of 4, which is a lot. And when this vehicle enters or attacks, so it's a Titan, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Which, most of the time it's going to bring you 2 lands for 3 mana and maybe trade with something. So like, think of it as Cultivate that sort of kills a big creature at the same time, because it will be 4/4 almost by default when you cast it, and then when it attacks it becomes at least a 5/4, it's not a 6/4, so it's going to trade with something big, no problem. And yeah, then we have the Agonosaurus Rex. By the way, the Lumbering World Wagon has an elegant 66.6% game in hand win rate. That's outrageous. Agonosaurus Rex 66.5. So these two are like head and shoulders above anything else in green. Agonosaurus Rex, just your friendly neighborhood 8/8 trample for 5 mana. By the way, there's more. You can cycle it for 3 mana, and when you cycle it, put 2+1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature or vehicle. It gains trample and indestructible until end of turn. It's just ridiculous. I played it in my last deck, and I cast it on turn 4, and I won that game. Eventually, after casting it for the second time and then casting 3 more Terrians or something. There was a long game, and there was a lot of trading, and chonkers were crashing into each other, but in the end I cast more of them. And then a huge drop off, but still amazing card. I mean, they are all having to be above 61%. Afterburner Expert, a 4/2 for 3 mana. It has Exhaust for 4. You put +2 +1/+1 counters on it. But the more important part of it is when you activate an Exhaust ability and this thing is in your graveyard, you can return it to the battlefield. Now, this card is just like generating so much value. I mean, it's easy to trade it, but it will sort of churn through your resources, and it just keeps on coming back and coming back and coming back. Once the game goes late, it will always attack as a 6/4. you block it, you trade with it, and then they just activate some stupid exhaust ability, and it comes back and it gets exhausted itself. And God forbid that opponent had Rangers Refueler while that was happening, and you just like, oh, they also draw like tons of cards. So yeah, Afterburner Expert is great. Only 61.6. And then we have still some, I think like 5 or 6 green rares with the over 60% win rate, but just below the bomb level. Web Strike Elite, the 2 mana 3/3 reach. March of the Ooze, the 6 mana enchantment that makes all your creatures into 6/6, which makes the Agonosaurus Rex actually smaller, but okay, that's fine as long as your 1/1s are also 6/6s. Regal Imperiosaur, the 3 mana 5/4 District Mascot, the 1 mana doggo with a counter, and you can saddle it, and then when it attacks, you get another counter on it, and you can remove 2 to destroy artifact. Okay, Stampeding Scaryfoot is not a rare. Autarch Mammoth is not a rare, but Mascot, Imperiosaur, and March of the Ooze and the Web Strike Elite are rares with over 60% win rate. The other ones are commons and uncommon with over 60% win rate. So yeah, plenty of good cards, and there's probably a chunk of them at 59% on top of that. Like, I don't know. Actually, no. That's it. Next one is 58. Thunderous Velocipede. That's still enough. That's still more than plenty. Then we go to commons, and Stampeding Scaryfoot is the top green common as of yesterday, and that will be changing probably through the format. Yesterday it was Ketradon, today it's Scaryfoot, with 60% game and hand win rate. For a common is a lot. For a 1-drop, it's a lot. But when you think about it, it's actually a 5-drop that is divided in 2. It's the 2/2 that makes a 3/3. And yeah, that has to be good. I mean, 5 mana 2/2 that brings a 3/3 would have been decent. The fact that you can split that cost across 2 turns and have the whole package on turn 4 is amazing. The fact that you had some synergies with exhausting is amazing. The fact that the 1/1 can stop any kind of aggression with 3/1s is also amazing, because you happily block with it when it means that you're not getting like 6 damage in the first 3 turns. So yeah, fantastic card. And Ketradon, the sort of opposite 6-drop, 6 mana 6/6 reach. When it enters, you gain 4 life, and it has cycling. Again, also, the card is not dead early in the game. You can always cycle it. It's not optimal, but you can, especially when you have some kind of a reanimator effect. But most of the time, you just want to cast it. And it's 59.9, so there's 0.1. Yesterday, it was the opposite, and Ketradon had an 0.1 percentage point higher win rate than Scaryfoot. That's why I said these things are going to be swapped around a lot. Yeah, and then we have Runover, which is still 59.5% win rate, which is better than most rares in other colors. And Hazard of the Dunes that the chat is asking about is 4th at 59, which is still good. And there's Pothole Mole at 58.6, which is still great. And Beast Rider Vanguard at 58. So chunk of green commons that are good. Not only the bombs in green are good, commons are also good, great. And there's more, because there is also uncommons with Autarch Mammoth, the 6 mana 5/5 that makes a 3/3 when it enters, and then it has Saddle 5, and when it attacks Saddled, you make another 3/3. That one has 60% win rate, sort of close to the Scaryfoot, but slightly below. And then you have a collection of other like really, really solid uncommons. Dredger's Insight at 59.9. So basically, Autarch Mammoth and Dredger's Insight are the same as Scaryfoot and Ketradon at common. Then you have the Greenbelt Guardian, 59.7. Molt Tender, the 1-drop that taps to mill, and then if you can tap it and exile a card from your graveyard to add 1 mana of any color. That one has like 59.5. What else is there? Fang Druid Summoner, 59.5. Terrian, the chunky 9/7 5 mana vanilla creature, has 59. So there's plenty of uncommons as well. So green has basically good cards at any rarity, any level, and yeah. What's the role of Dredger's Insight? Is it in every green deck? I think it will be okay in most, but best clearly in Golgari decks. But I think you can play it in other decks as just a sort of like a impulse card draw spell that will gain you a couple of life. The 2/4/8 tutor, yeah, it's good. It's good. It's got a 59% win rate card. Of course, when I say good, it's not generically good. You need to have at least one small thing and one big thing. It's best in green white because green white has the best vanilla combination. But I would want to have Tarion, and I would want to have the 2-drop in the deck for the 8 tutor to be really good. Now, in terms of the multicolor bombs, Sapsunan, Luxa embodied, 3 green blue, win the game, is a good card because usually you cast it and you win the game. Okay, it doesn't say win the game. It is a reach, trample, indestructible. Can't attack or block unless it has even number of counters on it. 0 is even. At the beginning of your first main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on Sapsunan. Then, if it has odd number of counters on it, draw 2 cards. So you play it as a 5-mana 6/6 indestructible blocker. Then you draw 2 cards. Hopefully you draw other blockers so you don't care that it cannot block the next turn. And then next turn you have an 8/8 that can attack with reach and trample, or can stay behind and block, whatever. That card is just broken, and it is sort of visible in the win rate. Anyone in the chat wants to guess the win rate of that card? 70.4% game in hand win rate. 70.4. That's just ridiculous. I see chat like 65, 67, 69. Nice. But no, it's even more than 69. It's more than nice. 70.4. You don't see that very often. This is like above and beyond. Obviously, you should first pick it every single time that you see it. And even like later it's if you are either in blue or in green, you just splash it because that card is going to win when you can cast it. And this is by far the best, but loot is at 66%. Riptide Gearhulk, that's the best of the Gearhulk series. That's the Azorius one, a double striker 2/5 with prowess. And when it enters, for each opponent, put up to 1 target non-permanent that player controls into its owner library, 3rd from the top. So it does the Teferi on them. And that one is like 64. And then there's Debris Beetle, also 64. That's the 4-mana 6/6 vehicle, and that drains for 3 when it enters. It's a 6/6 trample with crew 2. Sita Varma, the Simic 2-drop, the 2/3, that has like 62.7%. Gearhulk, the red-green Pyrowood, that's 62%. So yeah, there's a bunch of the things that fulfill the bomb criterion in multicolor, and most of them have some sort of green in them as well. Chat says that it feels like a bombiest format in the history, or someone in chat said. I don't think it is. No, I don't think it's that bad. But some of those bombs are. The Sapsunan is just atrocious. And I think that most sets I discuss, most colors have 3 bombs in them. And when you look at it, okay, green has more than 3, but black has 2, but red has 2, but black didn't have a single card that I would qualify as a bomb based on the win rate, even though it's a good color. Blue had 1, and white had 1. So this is not like there's not too many of them. The ones that are there are just atrocious. But this set has like really, really, really a lot of really powerful uncommons. So this set is really pushed on uncommon level, and green is pushed on any level. Right, for the signposts, well, there's 4 of them that fulfill the bomb criterion. When you think about it, that's a lot. Thundering Broodwagon, the black-green vehicle, 63.2. Veteran Beast Rider, 61.7. That's the Selesnya 3-drop, the 3/4 that untaps your creatures every turn. Which, by the way, if opponent casts some of the Charmed Sleeps on your creatures, they just untap. Fun. So they are quite useless unless they are played on the Beast Rider itself. And this is the sort of reason to play Selesnya. I said that Selesnya has decent win rate, but I'm pretty sure that decks with veteran Beast Rider in them that are Selesnya are much better. So once you pick like the one links, or you open the Beast Rider, you can pick it, because if you pick it, you're going to have the really good version of the green-white most likely, and good version of green-white should be competitive with the top tier decks. And I think that the function of the number of Beast Riders in your deck is going to be the function of how good your white-green deck is going to be. Then we have the Sky Serpent Seeker, the Simic one, the 1/1 with Death Touch that has exhaust for 4 mana, and then that ramps you 2 lands from the top of your library and it becomes a 2/2. That one is 61.5. And Home the Network at 61, the Dimir Zenith Flare for Artifacts-ish, that makes 2 top tiers, also at 61. So these 4 have above 61% win rate. That very few cards at rare met this criterion. And they are 4 top uncommons in the set as well, together with the blue vehicle that I mentioned, the one that makes you draw for each time you activate Exhaust. So very powerful signposts, 4 of them. We have 20 in this set, so some are bound to hit, but that's still quite impressive. 63% win rate for an uncommon is a lot. And yes, as the chat noticed, 3 of them are in green. Then we have a drop-off in the sort of second tier of them. Still great cards, don't get me wrong. You have Broadside Barrage, the blue-red deal 5 and loot. That's 60%, great. Brute Heart Engine, that's the other black-green thing, that the one that surveils every turn, and then you can cash it in for 4 mana and reanimate something. That's 60% win rate card. And Gastel Thrill Seeker, the black-red creature, the 2/3 for 2 mana that starts the engine and then pink someone for 1. So basically, you'll always be at start your engine at least 2 after you're casted. That's a very easy way to push that start your engine towards 4 without having to attack, which is a very good skill. And then we have the Embalm Ascendant. That's the Orzhov one, 59%. That's the 1/2 that brings a 2/2 friend with it, and then turns into a sort of not Blood Artist, but the one that only works when your creatures die and it drains, which is still good enough. Ranger's Aetherdrift, the blue-green vehicle that makes a top tier every time you activate Exhaust. That's a 58% win rate card. And then it's a small drop-off to Rocketeer Boost Buggy, the red-green vehicle at 57. And you see in the 8 best signposts, 7 are not vehicles. So this to me is, am I right? I think I'm right. Yeah. 7 of them are not vehicles. Top one is the Thundering Broodwagon, but it's a vehicle that also has a removal spell tagged to it. So I guess, it counts for something. So I think that the one thing that you should pay attention to is that, well, basically you want to be playing the non-vehicle ones as a priority. Of note, if you sort them by the game in hand win rate, the 2 bottom ones are the Boros ones, with the win rate of Cloudspire Coordinator, the 3/1 for 2 mana with Scry 2, and you can tap it to make pilot creatures equal to the number of vehicles and mounts that enter the battlefield under your control. That one is 54.2% game in hand win rate. And Cloudspire Sky Cycle, the 4 mana 2/3 vehicle with flying, when it enters, distribute 2 counters among 1 or 2 other creatures you control. That one has 51% win rate and is actively bad even in the Boros decks, which are not great. So that's pretty damning. That's a pretty damning condemnation of the card. Of note, just outside of the top 10, we have the Guide-like Pathmaker, the 6-drop 6/5 vigilance vehicle that searches your library for an artifact, and you can either put it on the battlefield if its mana is 2 or less, or put it in your hand if it's not, and then you shuffle, and it has crew 2. That one has only 56.5 game in hand win rate, but it's put in relatively bad decks where it's a very key part. Now, I think that there is a potential of making those bad Azorius decks slightly better, and when they are slightly better, and this is a key card for those decks, it might move up as you streamline how the Azorius decks are being built. Also of note, 56% for the Boom Scholar, the red-green 3-drop, 3/3 creature. And I think it's notable absence on that top 10 list because, as I said, 7 out of the top 8 signposts are creatures. That one is also a creature, and not only it doesn't make a top 8, it also doesn't even make a top 10, despite red-green being a good card, decent color combination. So the Boom Scholar looks like it's a bit behind curve. You should probably prioritize it slightly less, if I would be guessing. Also, slightly worse than that, at 55 is the Lagorin, Soul of Alakria, the Selesnya Beast Mount. That's a 1/1 flyer, and when it attacks while saddled, you can put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target mounts and or vehicles. And I don't know what's the problem with this card, but yet maybe it's put in decks that are too heavy on the artifacts and vehicle synergies, and maybe it just should be like an addition to your normal aggro run-of-the-mill deck. But or maybe there are just no good things to saddle it. But I just want to highlight that it has a pretty much lower win rate. So keep that in mind. So for each color pair, I'm going to be looking at the best hidden gem and the trap, both common and uncommon, and hopefully that will add some context to the color pair that we're discussing. Keep in mind, this is all early data, so those things are quite fluent and they will be changing over the format, with some colors more than with the others. But we start with the best color combination so far, Simic. I never thought I would be able to say that, honestly. The best color combination, Simic. Let that sink in. And the best common in there is the Migrating Ketradon, the 6-drop 6/6 reach. When it enters, you gain 4 life. And this is, at least in my opinion so far, the defining card of the format. Because it still goes relatively late. And when it drops on the board, it just resets the game clock to 0. And I think is the main driving reason why regular aggro decks that you're going to be used to in other sets are not performing well. Like, this is the reason why Boros is not doing well. Because Boros just will play their small game, drop the opponent to 8, and then in normal sets, from then it would just take over and then find a way of dealing that last 8 damage. Here, opponent drops a Ketradon, go back to 12, and put this 6/6 reach that they can't just do anything about. And that will give them time to find a second Ketradon, drop it, go to 16, and start slamming with one of them. And what do? You block with your 1/1s for some time, but that, of course, limits your capability of counterattacking. You cannot use the Sky Plan because it has bloody reach, and the game usually ends in a hurry. Combined with a couple of other things like lack of Oblivion Ring, lack of Banishing Light, this makes it really hard for like wide aggressive decks to combat that card. Also, it's like bigger than most things and bigger enough that it can clunk the board and game starts looking different from the moment that Ketradon enters the battlefield. Because once it starts being on the battlefield and it's not killed instantly, it brings a different layer of the game where it's going to be a board stall. And the deck that's going to win is the deck that is better equipped in breaking the board stall. And that means card advantage, that means removal, that means big evasion, and whoever doesn't have a Ketrodon is disadvantaged in that game, because if you don't have the Ketrodon, all of a sudden your opponent has multiple ways of attacking you, while person with the Ketrodon stops, for example, flying. So yeah, 62.3% game in hand win rate in Simic decks for Ketrodon, which is ridiculous. The hidden gem I selected for this deck is the Skystreak Engineer. I already told you when I talked about the best blue commons that it was the third best blue common. In Simic particularly, this thing has 61%. And this makes it very early pickable. And probably part of that high win rate is because people get it very late and they get a good card very late. I think that once the format gets, people get more in the know thanks to listening to, well, things like this, for example. They will start picking it a bit earlier, and there is going to be a resurgence of that card being picked earlier. And of course, one big advantage of having a card that you can pick late that has a high win rate is that you don't have to sacrifice high picks to get it, and you still get it. And once you have to sacrifice early pick to pick it, the win rate will drop off probably. But still, you probably should notice that this one is a 61% win rate card in Simic decks. I will definitely not ignore it next time I see it. And the trap I selected, to the despair of Nerdy Steve, is Hull Drifter. And I had to select something as a trap, and this one was the most played card that had a lower-ish win rate, but it's still 56.5, which is probably better than any common in Boros decks. So it's not outrageously bad, and in some decks it's going to be way better. For example, if you have what's the name, Transit Mage in your deck, having one Hull Drifter is not bad, because it gives you the option to tutor for it, and if you have a couple of other cards in that Transit Mage package, you're going to be quite happy to bring the Hull Drifter from time to time, draw 2 cards. And yes, the Crew 3 is atrocious on it, but if you can trade it with like another flyer, that's fine. Or if you even can chump block with it without sacrificing your board presence, because you just sacrificed the Hull Drifter that already drew your 2 cards, it can be fine. It's just that the card is not a priority, and it's not going to be amazing in every deck that you have. It's just playable, but begrudgingly in those decks. And I had to pick up a trap. In terms of the uncommons, Ranger's Refueler, best home for it. And this is, as I said, a bomb level uncommon. 63.1% game in hand win rate in blue-green. That's the one that whenever you exhaust, you draw a card, and it has exhaust itself, so it will always, you can convert it into a card. If you want to, it turns into a 4/4 creature that doesn't need to be crewed anymore. Hidden gem that I selected, and it will be, I think, repeated a couple of times, is Stock Up. This card goes way too late and should be picked higher, and don't ignore it. When I was talking about those board stalls, this is the kind of a thing that breaks those board stalls, because you draw 2 gas, because looking at top 5 cards of your library, 2 of them are going to be some sort of gas. Either, you have like Ranger's Refueler on board and you pick up 2 exhaust creatures, or you pick up an important piece of removal in a Ketrodon, and all of a sudden the game is changing drastically in your favor. So that card is going to break those board stalls, and it has this sort of double feature that when you cap this sketchy hand, and maybe you're like 3 lands and you're thinking, okay, I need to make sure that I don't miss my land drops, you cast Stock Up on turn 3, you're playing a game that will neutralize the early game of your opponent if you cast Ketrodon on curve. So you don't have to worry that much that you are using 3 mana and not progressing to the board, as long as it will allow you to, lead to this board stally situation when you drop like a Stock Up and turn 4 Hazard of the Dunes. That stops most of the attacks. And then turn 5, you drop something else, and then turn 6, Ketrodon, and you're good. So Stock Up that will progress your plan to do that is going to be very beneficial for you. And the trap that I selected is Diversion Unit. And it's a good card, don't get me wrong. It has 57% win rate, which is not bad at all. It's just not at its best in blue-green specifically, because, again, it's not on the plan, really. Your plan is not to, like, cast it on turn 2 and do, like, 6 chip damage and then finish the game somehow in a different way. this is not what you're trying to do. You'd rather cast this 1/3, stall some kind of early damage from the opponent, and make sure that you survive till the late game when you just take over. And it doesn't really matter that you did those 6 chip damage, because you're going to slam with a 9/7 with trample or something. So yeah, it's good card, but it's more on the Dimir Azorius plan than on what blue-green is trying to do. And again, still pretty good. It can counter the removal at a key moment. The problem is that that information is face up, so probably your opponents are going to play around it or something. SciTech 2K says that stock up is good when you drafted any gas, and that's not always the case in their case. Well, yeah, I mean, just draft more gas, damn it. It's a car themed. It's a car themed set. You should have enough gas. Okay, black green, top common. Any guesses? Yes, it is Ketrodon still, 61.4%. So slightly lower win rate than in blue green, but still 61%. You can't ignore it. Hidden gem I selected is the Engine Rat. The 1-drop with Death Touch that has 6 mana, each opponent loses 2 life. That has 60.9% win rate, which is amazing. This card is way better because, look, this is a rat that trades with the Ketrodon, or this is the rat that forces those board stalls, because who wants to attack into a 1/1 Death Toucher? And once it forces the board stall, it also becomes like a way of killing the opponent, because even if you don't draw gas, you always can spend 6 mana and just ping them for 2. Or you can generate some situations where when you start doing the attacks, and that speeds up your clock significantly, while it's still a good creature that holds off the fort. In the end, they will have to deal with it and use the removal on Engine Rat. And if they use the removal on Engine Rat, they don't use the removal on Ketrodon, which is nice. The trap I selected is the risky shortcut. The 2 and a black sorcery, draw 2 cards. Each player loses 2 life. It has 54.4, just not good enough for your deck, I think. That one should be actively avoided. I think that this card can have its spots, but more in like black, red, I think, that wants to start the engines and then get max speed without doing too many attacks. That card might be good in that kind of deck, but not particularly in the black green. Is Rat better than the 2/1 Death Touch Lagak, or Rat just easier to draft? A bit of both, I think. Okay, I'm not. Maybe I'm lying. I don't think that Rat is particularly easier to draft. It's basically, so Rat has 60.9% game in hand win rate, and the Lagak, I have to scroll way lower, and it has 57.7. I think it's the 6 mana ability, honestly, and the fact that on 1 mana it's not competing with other 2 drops on the mana curve. That's also a big advantage. Weirdly, sometimes it's important that it's a zombie. For example, there's very few zombie synergy cards. 57.7 is fine, but I had to scroll really low. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 commons in black green that have over 60% game and hand win rate. So Ketrodon, Runover, Hazard, Engine Rat, Porthole Mole, Silken Strength, which is probably also a good candidate for the hidden treasure. Wreckage, Wickerfolk, Scurryfoot, Spin Out, Bobble. These are all over 60%. Then there's a bunch of 59s. Like Vanguard is probably one of the better 2 drops, better than the Lagak. Omnivore is better than the Lagak in terms of win rate, and then you go into the Lagak. No, I'm using all players, Exiled Tsar. I'm going to look at the top players' data later because I want to have larger sample sizes, and especially for the color per specific data, I wouldn't have enough of a sample size for top users only. Like, I mean, there is something, but we're talking about 1,000 games, which has like large large variance. You see more or less the same trend anyway. Vanguard is even higher in the win rate, and when you look at the top players, and Ketradon is dropping off. So Ketradon is the better, the weaker the player, I guess. But yeah, Lagak also has like much lower win rate. But yeah, next week I will hopefully be able to at least look at some of the top player data, but not just yet. Not just yet. Okay, the uncommons, the Broodwagon obviously is busted. It has 64% game in hand win rate. Back on track, and most of the win rate of that card is in black-green, has 63.8, and that's my hidden gem. And again, back on track and the Broodwagon are best friends, I guess. Cycle the Broodwagon, bring it back with back on track, kill something, make a pilot to crew it, and happy times. Also, why does the Broodwagon have reach? I already attacked into it like an idiot because I thought, okay, there's menace, that's fine. And then this giant crossbow was there for some reason. I just decided, probably not important, I'm just going to ignore it. Turns out the giant crossbow was reach, and my creature died painfully. And yeah, the trap I selected is Rise from the Wreck. Again, 56.4 is not terrible, but it is an uncommon. You would expect more from an uncommon. And, you know, compare it to Back on Track, which has 63.8, Rise from the Wreck only 56.4, tells me something that this card is not so easy to enable. And you should be very careful about playing it. Even though it does give you a lot of value when you cast it in the right moment, it will probably rot in your hand more often than not. Because of the board stalls, the graveyards are not filling so readily. Yeah, maybe 3 Rise from the Wreck is maybe too much. But, I mean, I guess you can make it work. Gruul, and the top common for Gruul is the Stampeding Scurryfoot. But it only has 58.9. And I generally saw that the cards in the red-green, they have much lower win rates than all the other top archetypes. And I cannot really explain why that is. It's maybe a bit more bomb-heavy. Maybe I just like, oh no, that's top player data. That's why I'm looking at top player data, and that is confusing. No, it has a ton of bombs that are like having a super high win rate. The World Wagon, Gearhulk, Draconautics Engineer, the Heavy, Boommobile, all of those things are having super high win rate. But when you look at the commons, yeah, the 58.9 is not the same level that we had in the previous archetypes. Like when with Ketradon 61, Ketradon 62, Hidden Gems at over 60% win rate. Here we go like 58.9 for the Scurryfoot. Hidden Gem I selected is Scrap Compactor at 58.5. It has a very small sample size. This is something you have to keep in mind, but I thought I will flag it because it's a very surprising result. So it has 58.5% win rate, again based on rather small sample of just maybe 800 games played with it, or 800 games it was in hand. But it's something to look for. It's a solid removal for those decks that maybe lack that source of solid removal, because you have Crash and Burn and not much else to kill the big things. So yeah, maybe worth watching the Scrap Compactor in those decks. What other commons are there that are useful? Well, Run Over, Gunner, all these things are great in red-green. Ketradon is still decent. But it's more like there's a bunch of solid things and nothing really sticks out as excellent. So I thought I will mark this Scrap Compactor as something. Trap, and here I actually do think that this is a trap, and I will just start treating it as a trap, is Loxodon Surveyor, the 2 and a green 3/3 with starter engines, and when you have max speed and it's in your graveyard, you can exile it to draw a card. It's just so much not your plan in red-green to start your engine and get to max speed. So you'd rather not focus on that, and not focusing on that probably requires you not to play too many cards, because there's always this temptation. Scrap Compactor is a solid card in some of the color pairs, yeah. I guess that it will be good in the Esper wedge as well. But yeah, Loxodon Surveyor Trap at 52.7, that's just too low, and people play it way more than they should probably. So yeah, watch that card and try to play it less. In terms of uncommons, and here again, I mean, we don't have like amazing numbers on those. Best uncommon, Greenbelt Guardian at 58.7, so roughly the same level as Scurryfoot. It just tells you something about the Scurryfoot's power. And Molt Tender, I selected as a hidden gem because it has a solid 57.2, which is good for the color pair, but not amazing otherwise. And yeah, it's a bit surprising that there's such a low win rate uncommons in here, but there's a lot of them. Like there's a ton of cards that have like 58, 57% win rate. There is the Boost Buggy, the Signpost, the Grease Wrench Goblin, Road Rage, Outpace Oblivion, Molt Tender, and Therian. They all do like fine. It's just like nothing is spectacular in those decks, which makes me think that they're quite flat and they are power driven rather than synergy driven. So you should watch that. And another trap that I sort of selected for this one is the Pace Setter Paragon. Again, I was high on that card before the set was released, but it's mainly because I just applied the rules of engagement from previous sets, and rules of engagement in this set are very different from previous sets. This would have been great. Like, you know, I start my engine, I attack with the Pace Setter Paragon with threat of activation, and then they never block it because they're afraid, and I get to my max speed and I get some value out of it and whatever. But that's not how it works. How it works here is that, oh, I attack with it. They just say, fine, I take 2. And I do it a couple of times. And again, I did those 6 damage, and then they drop Catrodon, and I can do Diddly Squat. And yeah, then it's just you activate the exhaust, and it's just a 3/4, and the 3/4 is blinked by like multiple things, and it just doesn't work. And that's probably why the card is like 52% win rate, and that's why I selected this as a trap. Not last. We're just on the 4th color pair. White-green, we have best common is Ride's End, and it has 58.9, which is solid. It's, you know, comparable to 58.9 of the Scurryfoot in the red-green. And this tells you one thing, that removal is good in this set, because this clunky and more controlling kind of removal for 5 mana is still good because it will kill big things eventually at some stage. And obviously Scurryfoot is not far away, and then there's Hazard and Run Over and Catrodon, you know, the normal green package. But it's worth noting that the white card is actually the best performing one in white-green decks, and it's played significantly less than the green cards that I mentioned below. The hidden gem I selected is Bestow Greatness, which is not amazing in most color combination, but in white-green it does perform relatively well, 57% win rate. That's fine. And the trap I selected is, again, a card that was much higher on before the set was released, the Leonine Surveyor. To 2-drop, that's a 2/2, starts your engine, attacks as a first striker, and again has identical issues that the Pace Setter Paragon has. Oh, cool, you have a 2/2 first striker. Now that first strike is so useful when it's blocked by a 4/5 or a 6/6 or a 5/5. Just doesn't do anything anymore and just like blanked. Maybe if there was the give your team +2/+1 kind of card in this set, multiple surveyors would have been decent. Or maybe if it had first strike and not just first strike on attacks, it would have been actually a formidable defensive force, but it doesn't. And because of that, 52.4% win rate, trap category. For the uncommons, and here we see the difference between red-green, that best uncommon was at 58.7, and white-green, where Veteran Beast Rider has 63% win rate. This to me tells that if you want to play white-green, you better make sure that you have the Veteran Beast Riders. This is your signal that you want to go into the white-green. If you pick it, early or late, whatever, you know that you have the best card that you can have for your deck. And once you fulfill that one criterion, you can be much more convinced that you can draft it. And I think that like later in the format, maybe already from week 2, it can start picking a Beast Rider relatively early, but not like first picking. But, you know, like you see it, pack 1, pick 3. You pick the Beast Rider, green is somewhat open, and white might be quite open because people are going to wean off white. and you're entering a deck that is both good win rate and uses the best color, but also uses the least drafted color. And if you know how to build those decks, you can have like a small advantage. Again, maybe food for thought for those of you that are going to be playing on the Pro Tour, and not to underestimate white-green as a color combination just because it has white, which is not such a strong color. Especially the second best uncommon in this color pair is the Glory Hit Lynx. And Lynx is, of course, like in the best house that physically exists in white-green. So you can reap the most benefits from those really good white cards that just don't have a good home in this set because white-red is not a working archetype, at least for now. And then Fang Druid Summoner is like a surprising number 3 uncommon with 59.7. That's why I selected it for the hidden gem. 4 mana, 2/4 with reach. That's pretty decent on its own right, because there are some decks that try to do the chip damage in disguise, and this just stops it. And in white-green especially, you have a good package of those vanilla creatures, because you have the 3/2 common and the Gibnic Omnivore, whatever it's called. You have Therian, the 5 mana 9/7, and you have the Sundial Dawn Tyrant, the 3/3 for 2 mana. And keep in mind, once you traded something off, you can also get those cards from your graveyard, not necessarily from your library. That's the best plans for the Fang Druid Summoner is turn 4, bring the Therian and cast the Therian next turn if you have the mana for it. Or cast Therian, do some attacks, trade it off, probably for 2 creatures, cast Druid Summoner, get it back from your graveyard, and recast it, and life goes on. Trap I selected, Unswerving Sloth. It has 54.7% win rate. And this is a card that could have been decent in some sets. It's like big, which big means some protection from removal. I mean, it doesn't make it immune. So sometimes you pay 5 mana and they kill it, but most of the time they will have to spend like significant chunk of mana to kill it anyway. So it's fine. And sometimes it becomes like an abyss. But in this format, it will just like attack, and sometimes it will attack into the Scatrodon and doesn't do anything, and that doesn't work as a plan. So it is a card that does not align very well with the rules of engagement of this format, and because of that, it has like 54.7 win rate. And white green is probably one of the better one of the better archetypes for it, and still doesn't impress. But you have like a chunk of like decent uncommons in white green, and importantly, lots of them are white, because you also have Gallant Strike, which is a 59% win rate card, and Detention Chariot, which is like around 58% win rate card in white. So again, if you see some of those good white cards, you just pick them because no one was interested in white in your pod, and you have some green cards. This is the moment when you can build the kind of white-green deck. Whew. Halfway there. And blue-black. And we have the best common is the Packdoll Terror. 60.6% game in hand win rate. The 4-drop, 3/4, when it enters, or another artifact you control enters, each opponent, you drain 1, basically. And this is your plan. I mean, your plan is to win the board stall by not having to attack to deal damage. And Packdoll Terror is a very key way of that, because it 3/4 is good for board stall. Again, it blocks all those pesky elephants and scary foods and whatever as a 3/4. And at the same time, as you deploy your threats, you are draining for 1. And therefore, you are better prepared if something happens that slightly changes the balance of the board stall. And also getting closer to killing your opponents slowly by pinging them with those artifacts. So Packdoll Terror, really, really good. Hidden Gem I selected is the second best Dimir common, the Wreckage Wickerfolk, only because some people are still not super high on it. The 1/3 for 2 mana in flying, it seems like this is the stat line for this format. Again, these decks can also benefit from max speed, because they don't need to put much resources to get the max speed. You just need to play turn 2 Wreckage Wickerfolk, start the engine somehow, and you are instantly on 2-3, and then you play a backdoor terror, all of a sudden you're on max speed. And you didn't have to like clear blockers or anything like that. So you don't have to spend resources to get to max speed. And if you don't need to spend resources to get to max speed, you can actually reap the benefits because you keep your hand intact, you keep your resources intact, you don't need to fire the removal too early, and yet you are at max speed, and then you can, I don't know, drop this 5/4 that makes 2/2 every turn, for example, or something like that. So I'm just trying to find the list of all the other commons that are decent in this color combination. Grim Bobble, obviously, Engine Rat, Spin Out, Nimble Thopterist is actually good in here because it makes an artifact. And a card that I was planning to put as a hidden gem, but I thought that Wreckage Wickerfolk is more important than that. But one of the top commons in blue-black is Tranquil Cove, the white-blue land. And I think that is very important when you're drafting this blue-black lane. You really want to prioritize the lands that give you white mana, because you will get those signpost uncommons that are quite decent in what you're trying to do in white blue, and there will be sort of like rewards for you picking the fixing early enough to be able to play those, because they play well with what you're trying to do. But also like Hull Drifter is good in those decks. The Skystreak Engineer, the 1/3 flyer, is also good in those decks. It has like 57% win rate. There's like a large chunk of creatures that go to those 57%. And one of them, actually, the Ticket Tortoise, 57.3. So that card is also another hidden gem for this archetype that I couldn't mention. But yeah. The trap I selected, Siphon Fuel. It's played frequently in those decks. It has only 54% win rate. The 5 mana, -6/-6, you gain 2 life kind of removal. Just doesn't do very well, so I would be careful by putting any or too many of them into your deck. It's not a particularly atrocious trap. It's just not very good, and is played probably a bit too much. Like Scrap Compactor has a 56% win rate. So that's probably what you want to be putting in your deck rather than the Siphon Fuel at 53.8. What else can we say? Well, I think that's more or less it about the commons. Best uncommon, Haunt the Network at 62.5. That's a very, very good win rate. This is a pivotal card for the archetype. 5 mana, make 2 1/1s, drain for at least 2, but probably more like for 4 or 5. This card, I played those games, board stall, nothing really happening because I have chonkers, opponent has rats, and I'm just waiting for that home network to appear and then just like eventually appear. I managed to draft a deck with 3 of them, Sizzly Man, and in 5 games I played, I drew 1 copy in a game that I already won anyway, so it didn't matter. And that was very sad. Because, of course, you want to chain those, and the multiples should be even better because you cast the first one, you get 2 Thopters, cast the second one, you get 2 more Thopters, and that should end the game in a hurry. The hidden gem I selected is the Voyage Home, the blue-white signpost, which has a solid 59% win rate in Dimir, just giving you the reason for drafting those white lands in this color combination. But like there are cards that have higher win rate. The Ranger's Refueler, Spike Shell Harrier, Transit Mage, these are all having like over 61% win rate. Carrion Cruiser, another banger in this archetype, 59%. And then you have like Voyage Home and Ether Siphon at 59% as well. Another hidden gem possibly. That's the 3 mana artifact that starts your engines, and you can tap for 2 to draw a card. What else do we have there? The trap I selected is Back on Track. As I said, it's a great card, but it has a clear home in green-black. And in blue-black, it's got only 54% win rate. This is not like a universally good black card, even though it's a top black uncommon. It has a specific home where it's so much better than anywhere else. And the best common in Rakdos is Thunderhead Gunner. I thought that, Rakdos is going to be like all-in aggro kind of thing, but turns out still you need chunkers, and the best card in the color combination is the chunker in the 4/5 reach that lets you ramage every turn that you want. And yeah, card is just good. And I think if you still think that this is like a blue-red build around, no, it's not. It's good in almost every red archetype. Interestingly, second best card is Crush and Burn, above Lightning Strike by half a percentage point, but still. And then you have Pagdal Terror, still better than Lightning Strike. And then you have Lightning Strike and then Wreckage Wickerfolk. So this archetype package, the artifacts package, Pagdal Terror, Wreckage Wickerfolk, Grim Bubble also plays well in this particular deck. Hidden gem I selected is Maximum Overdrive, the 2 mana +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains Death Touch and Indestructible until end of turn. This is like a solid impression of the hard removal in those decks. It actually has a higher win rate than Spin Out, by the way. While you can pick it, it wheels 60% of the time, while Spin Out will almost never wheel, and it's one of the highest picked commons in the set. Definitely an interesting card thanks to its wide availability. And this is the way that you can give like some damaging or pushing power to your deck, because you can start attacking. If you attack with a small creature, your opponent most of the time will read that you have the Maximum Overdrive in your hand. So what? What are they going to do? They can block and lose their creature, or they can skip blocking and you do the damage that you so much wanted to do. Fine. I mean, 56% game and hand win rate is not amazing, but it's good for this particular archetype. The trap I selected is Burner Rocket, which I thought would be playing the role that I think Maximum Overdrive is playing in this deck. But unfortunately, again, a victim of rules of engagements don't promote that kind of gameplay. This is not a format where those aggros are pushing the damage here and there. This is the format where you just drop haymakers like the Gunner, and that's the good thing to do in this format so far, at least. So yeah, Burner Rocket, you attack with your 2/2, and they block with the Ketradon. Oh yeah, I'm going to give it +2/+0 and trample. Oh wait, that doesn't do anything. So sad. And yeah, the body that it reads behind is just not aligning with the plans for the decks. As you can see, like even if you want to do the kind of start the engine thing in Black-Red, it seems like the Pagdal Terror Wreckage Wickerfolk plan of achieving it is better than anything. And the only like decent start the engine card in this format is like Streaking Oil Gorger, maybe Mutant Surveyor. These two are sort of like the good ones. The Streaking Oil Gorger, the 3/3 flying haste that has lifelink when you have max speed for 5 mana. In terms of uncommon, Gustal Thrill Seeker, 60.9, that's very solid. Another way of getting to the max speed relatively easy. And, once you get to max speed, it has Death Touch, which makes it relevant as either unblockable creature late in the game or a good block. Hidden gem I selected is the Grease Range Goblin because I still see them way too late. That card is really good, gives you so much card selection. 60.1% game and hand win rate. Does the 2/1 with exhaust, discard up to 2 cards and draw that many, and we put a +1 counter on it. And the trap I selected is Spire Mech Cycle, another card I was like higher on. And this one suffers from a very different problem. It's a 5-drop, 5/4 vehicle with crew 2, which is reasonable, haste, and it has an exhaust cost. You can just tap a mount or a vehicle you control, and this becomes an artifact creature. And you put counters on it, and for each mount and vehicle you control, other than this vehicle. This, in my opinion, runs into the trouble that people who play it, they have it as their top end. And it's their one big thing that they have. And because of that, that card is bad. Because other decks have like 6 big things. They can blanket. The other decks that don't have the big things, they have probably like 4 removals for big things. And then your one big thing looks like a buffoon. It's, when you slam Ketradon into Therian, into another vehicle with 6 power, you can go through the number of interaction with big things that you need to have in this format to survive. But if you have this one mech cycle, it will just trade with one Ketradon, and that's fine. Or it will trade with one removal that can kill a big thing, and opponent will move on with their lives because they were prepared for it, because they have to be prepared for the decks that have multiple of those big threats. If they are not, they're going to die to them. So your mech cycle, just without support of other chonkers, is just not chunky enough. That's the problem. What other uncommons are worth discussing here? What else do we have? Momentum Breaker, the 2-mana Edict, is really good. I mean, it's got like 58% win rate in this deck. Outpace Oblivion, this is also the best home for the Outpace Oblivion. It has 58% win rate. But not much more good news for that here. Wicker Folk Indomitable, that one has 48% win rate. That's even worse than the Spire Mech Cycle, because this is exactly the middle-sized card that doesn't do anything late in the game in this format. Also, Intimidation Tactics has a very, very bad win rate of 50, but always is ace when it's played against me. So, sucks. Okay, white-black. Best common is the Engine Rat, 58.5, which is acceptable. We're talking about a weaker color pair right now. And the hidden gem I selected is this Streaking Oil Gorger I mentioned earlier, the 5-mana 3/3 flying haste that gets lifelink when you have to start your engines. And this tells me this is the plan you want to be pursuing in white-black. Nickel and dime start the engine. I'm not talking about, aggro start the engine when I try to play my creatures and attack with them and then finally get to the engine max speed. I'm talking about, I'll ping you here, I'll ping you there. Maybe I'll attack with the 1/3 flyer or something, and I will crawl into this max speed without using any resources to do that. So I don't want to spend resources on maxing my speed. And once I'm there, 3/3 flying haste lifelinker, great. And that's the plan that is good in this set. And the plan that is bad in this set is what I selected here, the Chitin Gravestalker. I selected that card specifically because decks that had it had just generically a lower win rate than any other black-white decks, which means that there are people that are trying to build this kind of like graveyardy kind of fillery deck, and it just doesn't work. And Chitin Gravestalker is the symptom of that by having this 52% game in hand win rate. While Streaking Oil Gorger, which is not an amazing card in other archetypes, it actually has a good solid 58% in white-black. So this gives me a hint, at least, that if I want to build my black-white deck, I want to focus on this Engine Rat, the Wicker Folk, Streaking Oil Gorger, Spinout, Grim Bobble. These are the top commons. Or Packdoll Terror, Ride's End. I have some removal and some nickel and dimey kind of small things that will manage to end the game while keeping the board stalled with those Engine Rats that are so important for it, and Ride's Ends taking care of, and Spinout taking care of the big threats. Another card that is really doing well in this is Avishkar Raceway, the common start your engines land. That has like 57% game in hand win rate, because once you ping your way to this maximum speed, you might as well Chitin. Oh, I said Chitin. It's chitin. I know how to pronounce chitin. I just didn't connect that the word is actually chitin. I thought it was like chitin. Well, yeah, I know exactly how it's chitin pronounced. I mean, luckily I'm not an entomologist, so I can be excused. But I honestly thought that it was chitin and sort of like making some kind of chittering noise or something. Well, that's a good one. But yeah, the insect warrior part should have given me a good. Should have given me a nice hint there. Hey, it's my third language, damn it. Now we talked about insects, you're hungry, or now we talk about kittens, you're hungry, or are we talking about grave stalking and you're hungry? Because either of those is a bad excuse. Anyway, I lost my train of thoughts. Oh yeah, and like things like the broadcast scrambler, also decent in those Orzhov decks. So this is the sort of way that you can look at this early data and try to figure what the plan is. And for me, like the big signal there was that when you have the Chitin Gravestalker, it has poor win rate, but even weirder is that the decks that play it, if they don't draw the Chitin Gravestalker, have even lower win rate than that, which means that people try to be a specific build of the white black that just doesn't fundamentally work. So this gives me like the impression that this is the plan I want to avoid. The same Spot Cycle Scouter. This is the card that has poor win rate when it's in the deck. While Streaking Oil Gorger, even if I don't draw the Oil Gorger, but I put it in my deck, those decks have the highest win rate of all decks in the white-black space when it comes to the commons, which means that this is the right direction of trying to build your deck, because not only the card has a high win rate, but also even if you don't draw it, it has a decent win rate. And then, yeah, again, puts me on the right track in terms of how I want to be building them in the future. In terms of the uncommons, the Glory Heat Lynx, 63.7, which is tremendous. And that means this card is just great. And it's another color combination when it can shine, as long as we figure out better how to build those kind of decks. And, Embolt Ascendant, the Signpost uncommon, is also great at 60.8. And then we have a drop-off, significant drop-off without those two, and like Nesting Bot 58, Gallant Strike 58, Gastel Raider, the 3-mana 2/1 that makes opponent discard an instant sorcery card, which, by the way, I played it in one of my decks and I had to play it against someone that had a Mako on board and it felt bad. But that one is 57, Sundial 57.5, that kind of stuff. Generally, it's like sort of attrition-y, small thing deck, the usual Orzhov things. But yeah, Glory Hit Lynx is super strong in those. And for good reasons. You're just getting free resources out of it and some life. And hopefully you have enough removal to deal with the big things and finalize the game for that. And then, yeah, Nesting Bot I selected as a hidden gem. But that's exactly what you would expect from a nickel and dime kind of archetype. When this Nesting Bot eventually will get into a 2/1 and trade with something and make this 1/1, and that 1/1 enters and it pings the opponent because you have the Pagdol, whatever, terror. That's what you want to be doing. What you definitely don't want to be doing is making your creatures slightly bigger through Cloudspire, or making some of your creatures slightly bigger through the Cloudspire Captain. 49.6, big trap, and that card generally is a big trap. It has like sub 50% win rates, quite a lot. Okay, blue-red. Well, I don't think that after the last archetypes, it will be a big surprise to you that the Thunderhead Gunner is the top common. 59%, solid win rate, and this is like head and shoulders the best common in blue-red. This is the card that you want to have like 3 copies of in your blue-red decks, because it enables everything in that deck as it works. And then you have the Chasm, basically, from 59, and at 56.8 you have the Flood the Engine as the second best common. And I would have bet at least like tens of pounds on the fact that that a Lightning Strike is going to be the best common in this archetype. But no, Thunderhead Gunner, and then Flood the Engine, and then Nimble Thopterist, and then Dynamite Diver, and then Spectral Interference, the counterspell, and then Howler's Heavy, and then Keen Buccaneer, and then Lightning Strike at 55.6. And you have to invest one of your top 3-4 picks to pick a Lightning Strike. You can get Keen Buccaneer basically 30% of the time on the wheel. Howler's Heavy you can get 70% of the time on the wheel. So these are the cards you don't have to invest anything and you get them. I'm pretty sure that Gunners are going to get much more highly drafted, much more highly. But like Gunner, Diver, Spectral Interference, Howler's Heavy, King Buccaneer, these are the cards that you can get quite freely, and these are the core of that deck. Well, don't get me wrong, they still have like 56, 57% win rate, but that's fine as long as you can get this premier things earlier, like the Barrage that we talked about as the uncommon. Dynamite Diver, I selected as the hidden gem because it's played awfully little in those decks, while it performs quite well. And again, I mean, couple of things. You have some vehicles in this color combination. Like, for example, you will just probably play some of the Ironclads because you want them for cycling. And this can crew them well. And also it can finalize the start the engine with little sacrifice of resources. Or maybe ping off some Topters on the opposing side to clear out the board for your attacks. The trap I selected is Stall Out, 50.5. I would have said that I can see this tempo build of blue-red, but again, tempo is not great with Ketradon being the top common because you don't want to, Stall Out is probably the weakest of the tempo cards, but you have the one that returns to the top, which also underperforms, and you have the Bounce Off, which also underperforms. I read so many cards until I reached Lightning Strike, and Bounce Off was not there. Bounce Off is there below Ironclad, Crash and Burn, Skystreak Engineer, Wreck Remover, and Midnight Mangler. And then you have Bounce Off at 54.4, and this pile of things that are having almost the same win rate. So I wouldn't put much weight in the order of those cards, but still it's significantly lower than I would have expected. And Trip Up, the return to the top or bottom of the library, is even lower at 53% to game and hand win rate. So all those tempo cards are laughable in this set. Like, apart from this Spike Shell, the uncommon, that one is absolutely broken. But I thought that there's going to be this red 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, bounce, 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 bounce kind of deck, but it doesn't seem that it exists. Okay, now lost myself there. Best uncommon, clear by quite a lot, Broadside Barrage. The 3 mana, deal 5 damage and loot, 61.1. And hidden gem again, just to make sure that I hammer this message across, is Stock Up. This one has 59.4% game in hand win rate, which is very solid. In between, there is the Grease Range Goblin, which you wouldn't be surprised is good in a deck that likes to have discard synergies. That one can discard 2 cards, which can trigger all your Makos and Sky Rays twice. Ranger's Refueler is still great. It's around 60% win rate. And Skyray and Mako are basically flanking Stock Up. Like, Skyray is better than Stock Up, Mako is worse than Stock Up, but they are all so close to each other that you cannot put anything between them. Maybe it is. Maybe these are the cards for your standard Otters deck from Aetherdrift. Maybe they are. What else? Yeah, that means Spike Shell Harrier, Transit Mage. Probably Transit Mage is as good as the number of Spike Shell Harriers that you managed to draft. But these are all doing fine. Roadside Blowout is doing fine. And actually, Pace Setter Paragon is doing fine in this particular deck. The 2-3 that I told you is not working in the red-green, but it does work sort of in this one. Trap I selected, Outpace Oblivion. For some weird reason, this one has only 55%. Again, it might change in the next days, but it looks on the weak side here. I mean, 55 is not tragic, but given how early a pick you need to invest to get that card, you at least should be cautious. I mean, it is a trap because you have to sacrifice your pick 3. Like, yes, I'm happy to pick a card, pick 6, pick 7 that has a 55% win rate. But if I have to pick it, first pick it, second pick it, I want my first and second pick to be at least 59% win rate card. That's why it's a trap in this criterion. I take into account also where you pick the card, not only what is the win rate. Now, obviously, a 55% card will make my deck. Don't get me wrong. It's just, again, sacrificing early picks for a card that has 55 is not optimal strategy, because you want to be picking those broadside barrages. You want to be, you can pick my gunner at 59% as pick 6, 7, and that makes me happy. But if I have to first pick Thunderhead Gunner to have it in my deck, I might be okay with it, but I wouldn't be like thrilled. Okay, and we move to Azorius. Best common, and by the way, this is a big signal to me. Best common at 60% win rate, which makes me optimistic that maybe Azorius is going to improve in the following weeks, is the Broadcast Rambler at 60.1. Not only it's an artifact, it also puts another artifact on board. Again, it has this nice curve out with the Voyager Quick Welder, and 60% is something I'm receptive to, and it makes me think that there might be something in this color combination solution space. So yeah, Ride's End has 58.2, which is solid. And then two next commons in this archetype are Scoured Barrens and Dismal Backwater, which means that blue-white definitely benefits from splashing black into it. Now, what does it splash it for? You might want to ask. Well, we'll see in the next slide. Gem I selected is the Voyager Quick Welder. It doesn't have like amazing win rate, 56.7, but it's good for... hey, no spoilers, Siver. 56.7 is, I guess, fine. And it would be bad even in some archetypes, but this archetype doesn't have that high a win rate. So 56.7, I'm taking it. And the card is still available relatively late in the draft. So yeah, just to make sure that it's important, especially because it offers the best Broadcast Rambler curve outs, I guess. Trap I selected is Interface Ace. This looks like something for the artifact decks, the 04 that can crew twice, or mount twice, or mount once and still become untapped as a blocker. But 51.8 is not making me very optimistic about that card. Cards that also are there in the sort of in the mix: Flood the Engine, Howler's Heavy, which, by the way, one of the wins for Arena is the noise that Howler Heavy makes when you pick the card. If you didn't draft it, I would suggest you just draft it for the sound. And Night Market, again, into the package with the Scoured Barrens and Dismal Backwater that will allow you to get that black mana. And Hull Drifter is making it into a decent card for this deck. Also, Spot Cycle Scouter, which is not great anywhere else, I think. Here it makes a fine card, I guess. I mean, not amazing, but a fine card, together with like Collision Course and King Buccaneer. But yeah, Interface Ace, definitely a trap. Are there any other traps in here? Cards that are played a lot, but don't have a good win rate. Gear Seeker Serpent, actually. This might seem like a card for that deck, but it has only 52% win rate. So be wary of putting your Gear Seeker Serpents into your decks. Best Uncommon, Stock Up. This time straight up, Best Uncommon. I don't need to make it into his Hidden Gem category. It's just very good. And the Hidden Gem I selected is Haunt the Network, as Sever spoiled ruthlessly in the chat on Twitch. But that is hardly surprising. I mean, there is a good reason why those black mana producing lands are so good. And of course, it's followed by Glory Heath Links, which is still busted whatever white deck you put it in, 59.5%. And then you have like the package of Spikeshell Harrier, Gallant Strike, and Transit Mage, and also Memory Guardian, the card that like maybe doesn't get much love, but 58% is solid. You'll be happy to play it in your decks. I mean, finally, that affinity for artifacts is doing something in this deck, I guess. And Diversion Unit. This is your deck where you want to play Diversion Unit, the 2/1 flyer, because it gives something extra on top of that 2/1 flying body. It gives you also synergies for those affinity things, and later in the game, it gives you somewhat protection of your big threats. Luca, I don't know how often do I think Haunt should be first pick over other commons, uncommons. I mean, it's clearly better than most commons and uncommons in the set. So I guess frequently it's not really a 2-color card, which is nice about it, because it's like, okay, let's look at the rarity common and uncommon. It's almost like a 3-color card because it fits all those Esper decks. It's the 5th best common and uncommon in the set in terms of game and hand win rate, which is fine. It does have a large fail rate, so the decks that play it, if they don't draw on the network, they perform much worse than other decks. So you should really balance those two things out. So, for example, if you pick Thundering Broodwagon, which is also a multicolor card with a higher win rate than Honda Network is, your predicted win rate for that deck will be like 59%. Honda Network deck, your predicted win rate for that deck will be 57%. So there is your difference. So if you would sort by the game played win rate, there is a ton of cards that are having higher win rates than Honda Network, and that most of them are green and black. So yeah, that's the thing. That's more or less the conclusion, that Broodwagon is in the best archetype, and by picking it, you're positioning yourself in the best archetype. Haunt is a good card, but like given those numbers, I would probably start picking cards, and if the lane presents itself and I get the Honda Network, I'm happy. But I'm also happy to A, abandon it, B, jump on the bandwagon of Broodwagon, or if green starts being open, shift the lane a bit. Yeah, and that's the kind of strategy I would be preferring in this situation. Right, the trap in Azorius, I selected Canyon Volter, but I could have easily selected the Cloudspire Captain. That was also pretty bad numbers on that. 53.5, that's the 2-mana 3/1 pilot. Whenever it saddles a mount or cruiser vehicle, it gains flying on top of everything. And just like 3/1s just are absolutely not aligning with what this format is trying to do. They won't do enough damage by the time that the big things start dropping, and then they will just look like buffoons. So yeah, best you can hope for it is that 2 of those can block a Catrodon, number 1. Or half of Scurryfoot, which sounds so bad. And we have like that the last color combination, the coveted Boros, the best color pair of recent years, but not here. Here it looks rather laughable. In terms of commons, like first of all, Gunner is doing the best again, but look at the numbers. It has 53% game and hand win rate. Let's look at the best common in white-blue, which is the second worst archetype, 60%. 59, 58.5, 58, 60, 59, 59, 61, 62. These are the win rates of the best commons in each color combination except for Boros. So the lowest one was like 58.5 or something, or 58. Here we have 53.5. That's massive difference, like massive. It basically means that currently, in the state we're in, I want to hard avoid picking Boros. And by the way, I highly recommend you listen, if you have time, Alex's last episode when he's talking about the state of the format. He mentions some people playing the sort of controlling version of Boros and with success. Maybe it's something that you might want to consider listening to. I mean, it's a great episode in its own right, but it gives you those kinds of ideas. But yeah, 53.5 for the Gunner. I selected Broadcast Rambler as a hidden gem at 53.2, but this is, again, nothing to write home about. Crash and Burn, 52.5. And, I mean, I'm not even going to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 commons have over 50% game and hand win rate. This is appalling for 17 lands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17 have under 50% 50% game and hand win rate. That's just beyond bad for 17 lands data. Now, yeah, you would expect that, that would be a normal for the general arena population for a mediocre archetype, but 17 lands users normally have 55% win rate. In this set, they have 56% win rate. To have more than half of commons being under 50, that's just bad. So as much as it pains me, because I don't like to give that advice, I would suggest just avoid white red for the first week, 2 weeks. And then maybe things change, and maybe competition for chonkers is going to be so big that people will be limited to have like maybe 2 per deck, and then you can start thinking about playing aggro. And I would not be surprised if that thing happens, because there's only that many big creatures per pod. And if everyone wants to chase them and then start prioritizing them, maybe we'll come to the situation when aggro is better in the late format. But for now, I would rather not. And specific trap I selected is the Brightfield Mustang with the 46.9% win rate, because people play a lot of it, and that's not a good win rate. Let me put it like that. And still, Glory Heath Lynx manages to do something, but only 58% game and hand win rate, which is, much less spectacular. Still, it's an outstanding card. I just wanted to make sure that it's given its due. I didn't even bother selecting a hidden gem at uncommon because I thought nothing there is good. When you look at the win rates after the Lynx at 58.3, the second best thing is Road Rage at 55.5. Remember in Simic when I said that the Hull Drifter is a trap? It had 56.5, a percentage point higher win rate of a trap card in Simic than of the second best uncommon in Boros, just to give you the impression where we're looking at. So yeah, this is one of those cases where there is no gems hidden in there. It's just crap all the way down. And talking about crap all the way down, Spire Mech Cycle at 49.5 is one of the shining examples of it. And I guess that, yeah, this sums up the archetypes of all the 9 color pairs in Aetherdrift. And yeah, we had a lovely 2.5 hours of the stream. Hopefully it was productive and useful for you. And yeah, with that, I'd like to thank 17 Lands, because I know how much work they put in so that this early data is available. And, you all love early data. I know how much this episode is usually enjoyed by people. I do prefer other episodes that I make at the end of the format when I go way deeper into the nitty-gritty. But of course, fewer people care because they are designed to be for most invested players. This is designed to be informative for every kind of level of a player, so fair. But yeah, I know how much work is required to get this early data out, because new set, you need to put all the cards, you need to make sure that everything works, and I know how much stress they do. So send them their love, and if you have like some cash lying around, please do patronize them generously, because they're amazing and they release all the data for the community to have access to, unlike some other companies that just hoard the data and sell it. And this is a very beneficial for all of us, because the more people have access to data, the more analysis we see. I see on my Discord and I see on Reddit, the people are digging deep into the data and playing around with the numbers, and it's always amazing. So yeah, thanks to them. And thanks to Fake Jake Brown, because he's the least annoying person among the annoying people I know. So yeah, thanks to him. He made this logo, and he helped me releasing the podcast for years. And now he doesn't, but I still love him. Now he's helping me with getting my boxes from Arena, which got stuck somewhere in the limbo. And with that, I'll see you next week when hopefully we're going to dive a bit deeper and add a bit more context to those early numbers and maybe see what changed over the first week. But till then, bye-bye.